Welcome everybody to another lesson, and in our grammar course we are moving on to looking at the past perfect. Now the past perfect for the majority of you guys seems quite difficult, but to be honest with you it shouldn't be too difficult. It's not so dissimilar, or it's not so unlike present perfect. Now the past, or the last sort of 3 or 4 sections of your grammar course have been dedicated to the present perfect. So by now you should know what we use the present perfect for and how to use it. So stepping into the past perfect should not be too difficult for you if you understand present perfect. There are differences obviously, and the first main difference that we have to familiarise ourselves with is just the structure of the tense. In the present perfect, you use have and a past participle, but this is past perfect. So we just simply need to change have into its past form, had. So we have had and a past participle. Okay? So it's simple to create, but I want you guys to understand why we use it. So let's first of all take a look at and refresh ourselves about why we use present perfect. Yeah? So we use the present perfect to talk about a past action which has a relevance to now, to the present conversation or the present time. So, for example, the car is dirty, they haven't cleaned it. Yeah? So right now, the car is dirty because they haven't cleaned it. So obviously this is a negative, have not, present perfect sentence. Now let's have a look at exactly the same thing in the past perfect. So here's your past perfect. So this is the point where we are right now. As opposed to in the present perfect, we're referring to the time that we are speaking. Whereas in the past perfect, we're actually referring back to another point in time. So, for example, the car is dirty, simple present, because we're referring to the current situation. Whereas in the past perfect, the car was dirty. Okay? They haven't cleaned it from the past to the present time when we're speaking in the present perfect. They haven't cleaned it. But in the past perfect, we're talking about this point in time in the past. They hadn't cleaned it. Okay? So the main thing that I want you to take away from this is that the present perfect and past perfect are really about sequences of events, particularly with the past perfect. We are going to use this to sequence events in the past, so one after another or one before another. Okay. Now just to demonstrate that to you a little bit clearer, the past perfect is used for sequencing one thing, but before we can sequence something we need a fixed point in time. Our fixed point in time is here. Okay? So for example, Jane arrived at 9 o'clock, Paul left at 8:30. Yeah? So Paul left before Jane arrived. So when Jane arrived at this point in the past, Paul had already left. Paul left at some point in the past, let's say here. This is when Jane arrived. So when Jane arrived in the past, Paul had already left. So it's creating the connection. With the present perfect, we create the connection between the past event and the present. With the past perfect, we're doing the same thing, but we're creating a connection between the past and another point in the past. Okay? It's a little bit complicated and it does take some studying and practicing to get used to it. Okay? But I highly recommend that you want to study the past perfect. So, this is your introduction to the past perfect. There's one other video tutorial which will follow this about past perfect. Then we are going to move on to the past perfect continuous. Okay?